Let's bow our heads, have prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for Sabbath. Thank you we're able to be here at the end of our prayer week where we've concentrated on talking to you. How do we do that? What have you said to us in the Bible, and what have you shown us in how to pray to your Father? Be with us today and help us to learn something new or look at something in a different way. In your name, amen. Hello to everyone here and to those watching from the Adina or Seattle, Launceston. You better be watching from Launceston, it's my family. But welcome wherever you might be. This last week has been prayer week for us as a church, and we've been running segments at nighttime through the week and last Sabbath as well when Kendall opened with a combined service. And there are a few things that we've actually learnt through there. Can I have the first slide up there? Thank you. Is prayer where we bring our wants to God, or is prayer how we learn his wants for us? Is one of the questions that have come out of this week for us. And through the week, we've learned to pray in his name, trust God, his will, and the amazing and awesome power that Jesus' prayers had when he prayed to his Father. And today I want to take you back to a really crucial point of time in our Earth's history. As Kendall was saying before, these are the moments, just the hours, literal hours before Jesus' death, which is one of the reasons you're sitting here today. If this hadn't have occurred, if this sequence hadn't eventuated, we would not have a Savior and eternal life. Crucial. The chief priests at this particular time were plotting to kill Lazarus. Why were they trying to kill him? Because he had caused such a stir, because how dare he rose from the dead. And that was really bad news if you were a Pharisee or a Sadducee, because people were now starting to believe in the power of Jesus. So we need to get rid of Lazarus because he's telling everyone that he got raised from the dead. That's not good marketing for us as this hierarchy of telling people how to worship. They were doing crazy things. The Israelites were starting to think for themselves, and they didn't like it. On top of that, not only was Lazarus the sort of center of attention while everyone going, wow, you've been dead and now you can talk. I want to talk to that guy. But Jesus is coming through and just performing so many miracles. This was his time. I mean, you look at a curve of how he did his miracles. It started off pretty slow, but by the end of his time here on earth, he had really ramped up miracle production. And it was causing a stir as well. And if you remember, at this particular time, Jesus had just ridden into Jerusalem. And what had happened when he'd ridden in? What was going on? What were the people doing? Praising, hosannas, there were palm leaves. It was pretty much how I expected to drive down the driveway today at Springwood. None of that occurred, can I just say? It may have had something to do with the fact that he was the Son of God, and they were finally starting to realize. And he had become powerful again for them. Some of them still had the wrong idea. Some of them still thought he was going to come in here, swords, and start killing all of the enemies. But some were starting to pick up on what he was actually doing. We get to Thursday night, the Thursday night. This is the night before everything is going to happen to culminate his life here on earth. And if we go to John, if you've got Bibles today, this is the end of prayer week. We're going to read some Bible verses today. We'll put it up on the screen as well. John 12, 27 to 28. This is the start of, we're looking at just a few prayers, 3 to 4 prayers that occurred, depends on how you count them, just before Jesus died, in the hours in that day before. John 12, 27, 28. And it says, if we can put that up, please, thank you. Now I am deeply troubled. Hang on, we'll just put it up on screen so you can see it. Now I am deeply troubled, and I don't know what to say, but I must not ask my Father to keep me from this time of suffering. In fact, I came into the world to suffer. So, Father, bring glory to yourself. How is that as a prayer? If that is something that you're about to, you know what is about to occur. You know you're about to die, and this is the first prayer you're going to say that night to your Father. And a voice from heaven came down afterwards and says, I've already brought glory to myself. So this is God talking now, God the Father. I've already brought glory to myself, and I will do it again. In this very first prayer that he prays, it shows Jesus doing two things. He is questioning, and he's also giving into. He's surrendering. He knows what's about to happen, but he still wants to glorify God with what is about to occur. Safe to say, I'm not sure how many of us would be wanting to glorify God knowing that that meant us dying a gruesome death. Not me, anyway. He's having a two-way chat to God too. This is not all one direction. This was one of the few times, if not the only, where God actually answered directly a prayer that Jesus prayed, where Jesus says something and God actually says something directly back to him. This was a two-way chat. For many of us, we have experienced death at some point in your lives. Either close, family, at least extended family in your lives somewhere. And oftentimes, death can absolutely sneak up on us. We don't know the day, we don't know the hour. If I asked you if you knew when your life was going to end, most people would not know. What would you do if you did, though, is the question. See, Jesus is living a very different life right now because, unlike most of us, he knows exactly the day and the hour that he will say those famous words of "it is finished." And these are the 24 hours post-communion he's just had with his disciples. Judas doing Judas stuff, and he knows what is about to occur. Most of you know, when I was in my early 20s, my mum passed away, and it was very sudden for us. I was actually, I guess if I back up a little bit, I was interstate at the time. I just started dating Emma, who I did end up marrying, so I was allowed to kiss her. We had just been dating for about 3 months at the time, and I had flown down to Sydney to go and stay at my ex-girlfriend's house. Completely with my new girlfriend, Emma's blessing, because my ex-girlfriend was being baptized that Sabbath. And I wanted to go down and support her. And it was late that evening, about 2 o'clock that night, Saturday night after the baptism. My phone was just buzzing. And it was the Royal Flying Doctor Service to say, "We've got your mum. You need to get to Brisbane to hospital very quickly." So I remember Haley's mum drove me out to the airport that next morning, like at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. Nothing was open. We're just sitting there going, what's the first flight I can get myself on? I don't care what, just get me on a flight. I'm pretty certain I cried the whole way home because they had told us, you're unlikely to ever get to talk to your mum again. And 3 days later, we had to turn off life support. And why do I tell this story? Because of the suddenness of it. The thing that hits you the most for those of you who have lost somebody dear to you suddenly is you think to yourself, what was the last conversation I had with her? I couldn't remember. Still to this day, I have no idea the last words I ever spoke to my mother. Undoubtedly, she was having a go at me about the cleanliness of my house, my kitchen, my room, the mold on which I've preached about before. She was a stickler for such things. And I'm sure it was one of those innocuous conversations that you wouldn't even think twice about, but they were the last words that we ever would have spoken together. I may have had long conversations with her when she was in a coma, explaining to her that I'm pretty certain that the woman I was dating now was going to be the woman I would marry, and explaining to her that I was never going to have more than 2 children, no matter how many she wanted, as in not Emma, my mother. Let's clear that up. My mother wanted a lot of grandchildren and preferably a lot of girls because she never got them, no matter how she may have named her children. And there we were, that suddenness that gets taken away from you, and you can't actually remember what you last did with that person. Flip that a few years later when my mentor, one of my favorite people in the world, my Uncle Ken, who helped me do everything from start my business, and I would talk to him 3, 4, 5 times a week. He was like the grandfather I never knew because my dad's parents had died when I was very young. And he'd never had children. He and my aunt had never had children. And so my brother and I were their sort of de facto grandchildren. His was a very different experience because his death, at a young age, we thought he was going to live forever because he lives on the beach. He would go surf skiing and running every morning, just as healthy as anything you could imagine. Died over such a long period of that year, from when he first went to hospital to when he actually passed away in hospital. Took forever, down at Gold Coast Hospital. I remember driving there 3, 4, 5 times a week. The difference there is the last conversations I got to have with him were very different to that of my mum, because all of a sudden the big things in life actually matter. The conversations we were having sometimes were the absolute mundane of, he didn't like sport, so I would try and talk to him about sport because it really bugged him. He hated expensive cars, even though his aunt owned a Porsche, and he drove in a Vitara Suzuki that was worth, I had pens at home that were worth more than that car. And we talked about eternal life. Here is a man who was not brought up an Adventist, had always supported my aunt who was an Adventist, but had never really discussed these things. He'd come to hear me preach or come to different events, but we had never spoken about God ever. And here we were facing death, and God was very much on his mind. Knowing you were about to leave this world, who would you spend your last moments with, and what would you do in those moments? It's a horrible thought, but it's a beautiful thought as well, because your life can get boiled down very quickly to the important things if you ask yourself that question. Everything else becomes fluff in your life. It's irrelevant. Who are the people you want to spend those last moments with? What do you want to talk about? They're probably the things important in your life right now. Jesus prayed. You could end the sermon right there. Everything about prayer is said by the fact that when Jesus knew he was about to die and this was imminent, the thing he did was pray. He knew what was happening. This was Gethsemane. This was the place of pain. It was that impending feeling, that feeling you have when you're sitting across at a table. If any of you have ever been let go from your job, sitting at that table and you're about to have that conversation with your boss and you know what's about to happen, but you're still hoping secretly deep inside that it's not going to happen. And that feeling deep within the pit of your stomach. Or that conversation with that girl who ends up with, it's not you, it's me. Oh, baloney. It was always me. But that feeling of just pure and utter nothing. A feeling in your stomach that you just cannot describe, of emptiness, of you have no control over it. It is being forced upon you. If we put up Matthew 26, if we can. Matthew 26:39. And it says, "Then he knelt with his face to the ground and he prayed. 'My Father, if it is possible, don't make me suffer by having me drink from this cup.'" This is the second prayer of that night from Jesus. "My Father, if it is possible, don't make me suffer by having to drink from this cup." He is imploring God, no, I know what is about to happen, and I am very human at the moment. I do not want this. And if that prayer had stopped there, we would be doomed. Thankfully, if we can put up the next slide, he adds one little line to that. "But do what you want and not what I want." Man, to have the courage to truly say that to God. Truly, not when you go to bed and you've had a really good day and you're, like me, you're saying your little fluff piece of prayer to God, sort of thanking him for how wonderful you are, how wonderful your life is, how things are going great. And of course, God, I will do anything for you. As long as you keep me where I'm at the moment, I am so yours. And we have all done it. It's probably bad form to call people liars from a pulpit, but you'd be lying if you did not say that you have prayed a prayer like that in your life. Because I don't think you would be human. Because even Jesus himself is praying this prayer. Don't make it happen to me, please, God. Not me. But his godliness steps in the line after when he says, "But do what you want, not what I want, what you want." He came back to his disciples at this point of time, and what were his dear disciples doing? His closest friends in the world, what were they doing? Sleeping. And I'm pretty certain Peter was a snorer. You just feel he's a snorer, don't you? Like he's this sort of gruff, big, rough man, sort of like a Pete Bacon, and he just would snore. And loudly. Jesus goes over. He is frustrated. He is at his last wits. He is about to die. He is praying to God to take this away from him. Praying to God. And he needs all the support he can have. And his besties are having a little snooze. Going, "Whoa, we've had a big day. Could be a rough weekend. I may have to pull my knife out on someone yet," Peter's thinking in his dreams. "Got to get ready for it all." And Jesus goes over there and goes, why are you sleeping? I need you right now. Luke actually says in his book, when talking about this second prayer, in Jesus' anguish when he was praying, his sweat became like great drops of blood falling to the ground. That was the best way he could describe it. I don't know if there were physical drops of blood coming from his head, but the description shows you how intense this prayer was. Fear is a love-hate relationship, isn't it? Because it gives you that adrenaline, it gives you that dopamine or whatever the doctors in here will tell you, whatever chemical it gives you, but it gives you that little bit of a rush. It's like Adventist drugs. You can do things that are fun and get your hit out of it because it gives you excitement. And as, young male, we would go around, and I remember my best friend and I, Simon, this is in our 20s, we would go skydiving, and you'd go to New Zealand and do all those big swings across gorges, and you would do everything you could. And we loved roller coasters. Faster the better, the higher the better. And as complete nerds, we would travel the world looking for the best roller coasters to go on. Because they were just safe enough that we felt okay, but they were still manly enough to make us feel like men. And I remember we once went to this place in Sandusky, Ohio. This was one of the biggest theme parks in the world. Brilliant, middle of nowhere, but man, it is awesome. And we lined up for this brand new roller coaster was opening. It was 2003. It was the Top Thrill Dragster. It was going to be the fastest roller coaster in the world. 0 to 200 in 4 seconds. It went up 41 stories high and then brought you straight back down. Don't worry, I'm going to show you a video in a second of it so you get to experience it. It takes about 15 seconds, start to finish, as you'll see from the video. And we lined up for maybe 10 hours to get on that ride over 2 days. Because the first day we lined up all day, waiting, but there were some mechanical issues, so they didn't open it. That always fills you with confidence for that next day. Mechanical, like, did a wheel fall off? Did the track break? What sort of level are we talking? Is the restraint just going to flip up? So we went back the second day, lined up, and we got to ride it. And man, top thrill all right. It was sensational. I'm not saying it's worth the lineup, but it was sensational. Can we show the video for a second, please? Yep. Cue video. Yep, that was 2 days of my life right there. Yeah. Good time, fun, and obviously felt very manly afterwards, so it was well worth it. Why do I show you this? Because a couple of years ago, my dearest daughter decided she loved the bug, and she turned 8, and she had now just gotten tall enough to go on DC Rivals down at Movie World. Anyone been to Movie World? Seen big pink roller coaster? I've got a photo, I think, Carmen. Is there a photo of DC Rivals there you can show on the screen? Not the actual of the roller coaster, the pink. There. That's DC Rivals down the Gold Coast. Fun as, little scary. And here's my 8-year-old girl. This is my little girl. And I was Pentecostal for the day. So why I bring this up, because fear, if you know what's about to happen, is very different to fear when you're uncertain of the outcome that's about to occur. And for my daughter getting on that, she'd never been on, this is literally the first time she'd ever ridden it. And she gets on it going, this is just going to be so much fun because I've been on the other little baby roller coasters. This will be great. I'm sitting there going, I'm petrified for her. What if she slips out? She's only just tall enough. Like we literally had to go to the special booth because when we went to ride it, they went, no. They said, go around and get a special pass. So you can go and get measured more accurately inside the office, and they give you a band which says you're actually tall enough to ride these rides. So we went round, and I'm thinking to myself, if we have to get a band to ride this, is she really tall enough she's not going to slip out? So there she is, and here I am going, I'm such a bad dad. Stand up really tall, Eloise, not on tippy toes, but really tall. Oh, exactly 140 centimetres. Wonderful. Thank you very much. And off we go to ride it. The fear of a father doing something like that, even though you know it is safe, was very different to the fear she had that day, which seemed non-existent. She just loved it. And now, she's just a roller coaster nutter now. And loves it. Complete trust for her was because she was sitting there with a dad who said, it is okay. You're safe. I'll be right beside you. I'll be holding your hand when my hands are not up in the air, praising. And we will be okay. Very different feeling. We get to the last two prayers that Jesus prayed. Matthew 27:46, if we can have that up on the screen, please. These prayers happen where? If we can show the next slide. Where are these prayers occurring now? On the cross. 2 prayers he prayed that day before, and now he is on the cross. my God, why have you forsaken me?" That is a really weird prayer. For God himself, in the form of the Son, to be hanging on that cross, going to God the Father, "Where have you gone? Why am I alone?" He wasn't. God was with him. God was overseeing. This was all planned. This was not a surprise to him. This was planned before humans were even around. This plan of salvation was in place well before anything else had been created. And yet he still asks. Even though he himself helped make the plan, knew exactly what was going to happen, he still has that human emotion of fear and aloneness going, "Where are you, God?" But then again, he always finishes his prayer. The next one, Luke 23:46, if we can have that one up, please. Luke 23:46. "Father, I put myself in your hands." That's a way to end a prayer. "Father, I put myself in your hands." He was literally carrying everything to that cross. Every single thing you've ever done in your life that you hope no one, especially in this room, ever finds out, he carried to that cross. Everything you thought, everything you've said, everything you've looked at, every feeling you've had towards another human being, he carried those to that cross. For everyone. We can't possibly comprehend that level. But his prayers show us that, first of all, he was not without fear. Jesus, with the human interwoven with the godly, had fear. Where God himself does not have fear, would that be a safe assumption? God, pure in God form, no fear. God in human form, fear. So for me, fairly basic math indicates that humans are fearful creatures. Unfortunately for him, he knew what the solution to the fear was going to be. And it was gruesome, and it was violent, and it was going to hurt a little bit. But he also knew from these prayers that he could share his fears with his Father. Every prayer he prayed, he was begging God, "Please don't. Don't make me do it. Don't abandon me. You have abandoned me. Where have you gone?" But he had such an amazing relationship with his dad that he was able to put his absolute, unequivocal trust in him. Faith, the Oxford Dictionary says, is complete trust and confidence in someone. And it happens to us in a relationship with God only when we can hand everything over to him and trust him. That can be scary. How many times do we hand our fears to God, but still petrified of what the outcome's going to be? As I said, those prayers where we say, "Hey God, please take this from me. This is a fear I have. It's something I need you to take from me." But you're still absolutely petrified at the answer or the solution that is going to have to happen for your prayer to actually be answered. Like, dear God, for those who have just left university, not picking on anyone in particular, I mean high school, not picking on anyone in particular, Colin. The question of what are you going to do with the rest of your life, and even if you hand that over to God and say, "God, it is all yours." I remember sitting there, I just had a conversation with Pastor Bob Possingham. Anyone knows him? One of my mum's closest friends, and he married them and he baptized us all and dedicated and just did everything. I remember having a chat with him after university going, "I just don't know what to do." By after university, I mean 6 months. That's as long as I spent at university. It was a good 6 months though. And And I said, I want to start my own business. I just don't know if this is what I should be doing. And he said, Loren, you've honestly just got to say, God, show me what I should be doing. I said, but Poss, what if he says I have to do theology? No one good wants to do theology. No offense to any pastors in the room. It's not me, God. People, yuck. No. And he said to me, you want to pray that prayer, you have to be ready for the answer. And he said, if you're not ready for the answer, don't bother praying the prayer. That has stuck with me my whole life. If I don't want God to talk to me, don't ask him the question. Not always a smart move, but what's the point? If you're not going to listen to him anyway, why bother? Be genuine with your prayers. And that is what Jesus is teaching us in these last few prayers that he had. Phillips, Craig and Dean, old school. You say that term, anyone over the age of 40 goes, oh, I listened to them when I was a kid. Had an amazing song, and we still sing it today, but it's based on a verse called Galatians 2:19. I think I've got the words up here. Do I have the words to that? For I am crucified with Christ, and yet I live. Not I, but it's Christ that lives within me. His cross will never ask for more than I can give. For it's not my strength, but his. There's no greater sacrifice, for I am crucified with Christ, and yet I live. It's a direct quote from Galatians. What's it saying? You need Jesus in you if you're going to walk to this cross. I'm pretty certain Jesus, when he said those famous last words of "it is finished," had no doubt that he had accomplished what he needed to accomplish. That last prayer he prayed, giving everything to God, everything, like we have never prayed, I'm pretty certain would have left him with the sense of absolute and utter thankfulness. He finishes it as well with, Father, I put myself into your hands. That was God. Still saying, I put myself into your hands. And then he died. Communion is one of those things where so often you go into an Adventist church and on Communion Day it is smaller than other Sabbaths because we obviously don't like getting our socks and shoes off. With those of my Catholic friends, Communion, biggest day of the month or whenever they're going to do it, everyone wants to go to Communion. Maybe it's because they serve alcoholic wine and we don't. Maybe that's something we could look at doing. Probably not. Why is it that we as Adventists so often shy away from communion? But it's okay, people, we are in COVID. No foot washing today. So why do we do communion? Because that bread, that wine is a symbol. And it is meant to reset our thought process back to one thing, this. Back to the cross. So that when we eat this bread, when we drink this, I say it to my kids, these things represent God's body. You're going to eat God's body and drink his blood. Kid thinks that's a little bit gross. And a fair point they have. But it makes us think to that time that we don't like thinking about because he died for you. He died for me. For any of you, just one of you, just me, he would have still gone through it. if you would like to get up now and go and take, there are 4 different stations around here, 2 on this side, 1 up the back, and then 1 at the far back there. For those who would like to partake, we would like you to go and get some of the juice and a piece of bread and bring it back to your seats, and we're going to pray over it. So if you'd like to get up now and go and get those.